Okay, hello. This is a continuation of our South China Sea discussion. And in this lesson, we're going to look at the resources. First thing I want to mention is that the pathetically small annual profit value of resources China is trying to steal in the South China Sea. Right now, this is based upon three assumptions. I'm assuming a 20% profit value for the extraction of these resources, and I think that is generous. I think Tesla in 2020 had a profit margin of 2.7%, so 20% is pretty generous, I think. And also, I'm going to assume that China is able to steal 70% or the lion's share of the resources, and I think that's generous too. All right, and last assumption is to extract the oil and gas. It to pump them all dry, suck them all dry takes 20 years. All right, that I believe is generous too. All these are generous, right? So you can't attack these. All right, so for the resources, we're going to look at oil, gas, and fish. All right. Here's total volumes of estimated or proven. Actually, these are proven oil reserves: 11 billion barrels oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of gas. Right. As far as fish, annually, the production of fish out of the South China Sea is around $20 billion a year. Right. So if we take each of these, the volumes times the price per volume, times the profit margin, times the percent they steal, 70%, right? Times the annual extraction amount, 1 over 20. That's the value you get. 5.3 billion for oil, 2.69 for gas, and $2 billion a year for fish, for a grand total of $10.1 billion. Wow. I mean, now let's compare that to China's GDP. China has a GDP of 14.3. So let's take these as a percentage of GDP. And you know what? I'm going to skip each individual. Let's just take the total. Total value of resources taken out each year compared to the GDP is not even 0.1%. It's 0.0705% per 100. Right? So this is tiny. It's not worth it. Here's another way of looking at it. Apple, computers company made 57.4 billion in profit in 2020. That is 5.7 times bigger than the potential annual profits from gas, oil, fish, right? That China could steal. All right. Now, in 2020, there were 43 companies that made profits greater than this 10.1. 43 companies in the world, right? Those are individual companies, let alone a whole damn nation. So is 10.1 billion per year worth all the trouble, blowback, and costs? Right? And this is the source of my data for this 43 companies. All right, so let's take a look at the cost real quick. One, you got possible, I say probable, U.S. and EU sanctions. In 2014, Russia's GDP fell 3.7%, largely due to U.S. and EU sanctions. And the ruble fell 57%, right? Cut in half. Now, compare 3.7% with 0.07%, right? So if you say, I'm not saying that sanctions on China are going to whack their economy 3.7%, but, maybe 1% if they're severe, maybe a 0.5%, but even then, it's way more than 0.07%. This is not worth it. Are you kidding me? All right, so EU sanctions are possible. Cost armed conflict, it's costly. Informal boycotts on Chinese goods, formal embargoes on Chinese goods. Diplomatic isolation. All right. Conflict with Russia. All right, that's another one. Well, I don't know if that will cause increased conflict with Russia. Nah, maybe not. Yeah. Okay. So, looking at that 70%, here's how I came up with 70%. Here's a map. You know, this is just a map. I don't know how accurate the total amount of oil fields are. It shows scattering oil fields around here. Clearly, this is in China's EEZ, as far as I'm concerned. There's Pratis Island, but Pratis Island is not likely to demarc economic exclusion zone. All right, and this looks like it's in China. Here's the border with Vietnam, so this is in Chinese waters here. Those, right? You got these. These are outside. Here's the 9-dash line, China's 9-dash line. Right, all these are outside, and really the only ones inside are these here and these here. All right. All right. Now that's existing, as far as I understand it from this map. However, the U.S. Geological Survey map of oil and gas reserves. This is what they published. Right? When was this? 2011 or something like that? 12? I don't know. All right, so these are oil and gas reserve fields, right? All right, so some of these are outside. Here's roughly. I'll kind of draw you China's 9-dash line, kind of coming down here. So it's probably trying to cut into these oil and gas fields here. All right. There is Natuna Island, so it comes down here, wraps right up there, come up right about there, Natuna Island. So it's getting these, all these. It's trying to get as much as it's possible, right? And it comes up here, so I'm willing to bet it's trying to get part of this gas field, oil and gas field. You know, maybe it's probably squeaking close to the border here of this one. All right, maybe not. All right, and then it comes up here. All right, so given that, I mean, this is China's already, I figure, you know, they're not going to get the whole of each of these. They're going to try to get a piece of it, right? Compete with it. But I'm estimating 70%. They're trying to steal 70% of oil and gas. That's how I came up with that. All right, so let's look at the threat of Chinese theft of resources. So control of resources is China's real goal, not obstructing free passage. You know, freedom of navigation. There are several key differences between the issues of freedom of navigation and ownership of resources. Freedom of navigation is more a universal concern, impacting the shipping of all nations that use the waters. Disputes over resources, on the other hand, are more isolated and parochial in that they are one-on-one struggles between China and each individual nation China is trying to steal resources from. All right, It's push and shove, right, between China and whatever nation. And what are you looking at? You're looking at Philippines. You're looking at Malaysia, Brunei, Indonesia, and Vietnam. That's pretty much it, right? Those are the nations China's trying to bully. All right. And more importantly, the total values are vastly different. For example, shipping through the South China Seas is valuated at 5.3 trillion per year, whereas annual profits from 100%, if China can steal 100% resources, oil and gas, amounts to 15.5 billion. Or we said 10.1 is what they're trying to get. So this is the total, 15. If China was able to steal all of it, they would get 15.5. which is a trivial pittance in comparison. All right, so I explained why you got to look at profit value instead here. So profit value must be considered and not gross value. For example, if China bought $1 billion worth of gas from Qatar, it would receive $1 billion worth of gas pumped, processed, compressed, chilled, and delivered on board liquid natural gas ships. But if China stole and then produced $1 billion worth of gas, it would have to pay 80% to produce it, assuming a 20% profit margin. Thus, the net benefit of stealing the resources is only 20% of total value. Right? All right, so 15.5 billion represents 20%. Doesn't compare to 5,300 billion. That's 5.3 trillion. All right, so 15 compared to 5,000. I mean, come on. Given the three factors above, small resource value, small value of the resources, right? No universal impact, and yet isolated individual disputes going on, it may be difficult to reach a critical threshold that would trigger U.S. or EU sanctions, short of sinking of ships and armed conflict. Personally, I mean, this is a matter of opinion. I think this is what it's going to take to throw on sanctions. You start sinking a bunch of ships. You have like multiple armed conflicts, right? USA is going to pull the trigger and throw on sanctions. Hell, we got sanctions on China already. Just jack them up. Furthermore, China would use divide and conquer, building one nation at a time over contested resources. However, the more China pressures multiple nations, the more these threatened nations would see reason to unite against China, perhaps using ASEAN, the Asian Association of Southeast Asian Nations, as a vehicle for coordinated collective action, bringing united grievances before the United Nations, almost like a class action suit, and to scream bloody murder to the world press in one accord. Right? You bring attention to this. The more you bring attention to it, the closer you get to the threshold of sanctions. All bully nations should guarantee physical resistance to every Chinese attempt to steal resources in order to build a body of cumulative damage / bloodshed that reaches the threshold that triggers U.S. and or EU sanctions. No nation should be allowed to sit back and passively accept China's thefts. Right? They come hauling in with an oil rig. Well, you block it. You make a big fuss. Right? You bump ships. You rally all sorts of ships. Almost like a Dunkirk. Just rally a bunch of ships. All right. Because the dollar value of the resources being fought over is so small, I don't believe China's theft alone is sufficient to trigger sanctions. I believe it has to come down to physical conflict, especially sinking of ships and bloodshed to trigger sanctions. Then the U.S.-EU leadership will say enough is enough and slap on sanctions. I mean, that's just my opinion, right? They may have a lower threshold, right? But I think certainly when there's sufficient conflict, they're going to slap on sanctions. Thus, victimized nations need not beat China militarily, which they can't. They need only make enough physical armed conflict that it triggers sanctions, which will make it too costly for China and not worth the pitiful profit of $10.1 billion per year. And come on. All right. The U.S. could help ensure that resistance against China is bloody. For example, USA has, I mean, this is like a proxy war. You supply key weapon systems, communication systems, all right, things like that, right? And you can make it very difficult for China. For example, USA has rapidly increased security relations with Vietnam in recent years. According to a State Department fact sheet, the USA is committed, quote, to deepening defense cooperation and shared resolve to address regional security challenges, unquote. Between 2015 to 17, the State Department authorized $32.3 million in military equipment transfer, including fire control, lasers, imaging, guided systems, military electronics. Between 2017 to 21, the USA provided Vietnam with $60 million in security assistance under the Ford Military Financing Program. Just gave them some cash. In 2018, USA gave Vietnam $81.5 million to support Indo-Pacific strategy. Right, so we're beefing up Vietnam. It's not costing us a whole hell of a lot, right? USA provided Vietnam 2 former Coast Guard cutters and sold Vietnam Metal Shark patrol boats and Scan Eagle surveillance drones, right? Such assistance falls short of a mutual defense treaty, but helps ensure that Vietnam can escalate conflict with China to a point that it triggers U.S.-EU sanctions, right? All right, so liars might attack. Yeah, but USA doesn't apply sanctions for conflict. Man, are you kidding? Are you nuts? Currently, USA has 36 active sanction programs in place, and almost every single one is conflict-related or human rights violations-related. All right, so here's the list down here. All these, I just copied these off the internet. This is State Department's website. I copied them from. Oh, by the way, here's sanctions on Chinese companies over here. That's one of the current sanctions going on. So just increase this, or add another sanction, something else. All right. Some will argue that sanctions will disrupt supply chains. Well, yeah, they will. All right, and I don't like doing that. You know, why screw our own companies, right? Yes, they will, but the impact will be temporary as U.S. companies switch to non-Chinese companies who have competitive prices. All right. And some will argue that sanctions on China would be inflationary. Well, that kind of goes with supply chain theory here a little bit. But sanctions could be tailored to minimize costs to the USA while targeting specific sectors, companies, industries, or financial transactions, right? Financial institutions also, right? Making sure it hurts China. Now, keep in mind the deterrent value of potential costs to China for resource theft, right? You got sanctions, U.S. sanctions. You have European sanctions, cost of armed conflict, informal boycotts of Chinese goods, formal embargoes of Chinese goods, right? Diplomatic isolation, any other loss of business opportunities, right? So, bottom line is costs far exceed possible gains. All right. And the dollar value of the resources are being exaggerated. Okay, that's the bottom line.